Ms. Palka, numerous surveys suggest that satisfaction with government services is a lot lower than it is in the private sector.
Yes.
So my question for you is, what's your assessment of the state of government service delivery today, and what should we be striving for?
It is lower, but it is getting better. I think what we need to recognize is that now it must get better faster. It has to get better faster in part because the gap between public and private sector is about to widen as private sector actors adopt AI, and also because AI is going to complicate the landscape within federal agencies, and so there's just a need to step up. I think the way to get it better is both to support a lot of current efforts that are already underway. My colleagues have mentioned several of them, and there's a great foundation to build on, but also to look at new tactics, like policy simplification, which I mentioned in my opening statement. The goal is a good question. I think many people will say that we need to be on par with the private sector. There are, of course, differences between the public sector and the private sector. I think the way I would put it is that the level of service needs to recognize what's at stake for the citizen. Very often, when you are engaging with the private sector, you're getting your cable bill or getting a car. It may be critical to you in that moment, but it's nowhere near as critical if you're doing something like managing expecting a tax return check or, getting your unemployment insurance, when that may be really life-changing for you. So the level of service should be appropriate to how critical it is to the human on the other end.
Very good, thank you. This next question is going to be actually to all three witnesses. And Ms. Blauer, I'll start with you, and then we'll work down the dais. This Congress, I introduced the Improving Government Services Act to encourage agencies to improve customer service and also reduce backlogs, which some have tremendous backlogs, unfortunately. My question, though, for each of you is that how can AI help agencies provide quality outcomes for these key services, but also protect individual privacy, something that we are concerned about and hear from constituents all the time related to their concerns. So, Ms. Blauer, what are your suggestions?
Thank you so much for the question. I think that I'm going to take the question in two parts. The first one is, how do we make sure that AI actually aligns to the outcomes that we want to see? And that requires leadership. We need leaders who can articulate goals for customer service that can create those expectations for what customers should expect in interactions with the government. And we should make sure that we build the habits within our government to measure whether or not we're hitting those goals. So we need to make sure that if we've set a standard, that we're holding to that standard. And then the way that we think about AI and the way that we protect individual information is that when we think about this culture of experimentation, AI right now, we're in a research and design phase, and we need to create a ring fence around these opportunities to experiment with the technology that doesn't include utilization of personally identifying information. We can get very far by using data that is de-identified, that is safe, and that will not expose individual level data. And we can do that by thinking really strategically about those frameworks that we set out in the bill, in the way that we think about building out these opportunities for experimentation.
Thank you. Dr. Novak.
Thank you. So I think that let me also take this in two parts then. The discussion that we've already begun to have and that you've alluded to around using chatbots and the ability to use AI to help answer people's questions 24/7 will help us begin to reduce the backlog. The ability to use AI to help us write better, clearer instructions and directions, again, will help people get customer service faster. The ability for us to use AI to bring information together across agencies, across departments, across those 10,000 regs that you talked about, that ability to now synthesize information, I think, can help us to create this more conversational ethos where we are responding to people's questions and then reducing the need for them to call in, to wait, et cetera. But we also also then need to speed up how we do that work, and that's where some of these co-pilot techniques, this ability to use AI to help us write code faster really comes into play. But I do want to just respond to the second half, and as Beth alluded to already, this ensuring that we are not using, and we don't need to in most cases, use PII, your personally identifiable information or sensitive information, and how we do this, I think is really crucial. It's one of the guidelines that we have put out in our policy in New Jersey as we've embraced and encouraged people to responsibly use AI in order to improve customer service. But we've said, be very careful, don't type personally identifiable information into these tools, not that of residents, not that of yourselves, in order to ensure that we are protecting privacy, even at the same time as we're improving customer service.
Thank you. Ms. Balka?
Wise words from my co-witnesses here. I support everything that they just said, and simply add that, I guess from the perspective of the Hill, pair mandates and directives with enablement. In other words, agencies want to do these things. They want to improve government service delivery. And there are many things that often stand in their way, make them take a long time to do things, jump through a lot of hoops. And as you say, as you direct them to take these actions, also ask them, what can we remove to make this easier?
Ms. Polka, your testimony mentions that our current federal procurement framework is simply too rigid, and that it prevents us from timely obtaining some technological capabilities like AI as well as cloud computing. This issue is actually a major priority for this committee, and we're in the process of looking at some reforms to the procurement process going forward. So my question for you is how can we change the framework to better obtain and use these essential capabilities like AI and cloud computing and any of the other types of reforms that you think are essential for us to consider?
Thank you so much for bringing up procurement. I know there are a bunch of procurement nerds listening who will be very excited that this topic is being spoken of in this chamber. There are a bunch of procurement nerds because it is such a complex issue. The federal acquisition regulation is, as you well know, 2,400 pages. And the number of things that could be done to it to make it easier for contracting officers and people in charge of delivery in government are numerous. I think in the time that we have today, what I would say is it's got to be simpler. Anytime something has that many different provisions, you're going to have people fighting over interpretations of things. You're going to have people saying, we can't use this, we have to apply this particular provision of it. And ultimately, if it's a little bit simpler, I think people will be able to get the outcomes that they desire from a particular procurement in more quickly. And I think speed and flexibility are the two things that you should be designing for if you think about any kind of procurement reform. There's a lot else, I think, to talk about there, but ultimately, I think what you want to end up with something that's not 2,400 pages. And the great thing about this particular moment in time is that it's very hard to understand what those 2,400 pages actually mean. Now, there are many people in government who really do know it backwards and forwards, but AI can actually help us suggest some simplifications to that. So it's it is part of the opportunity of this particular moment.
Thank you. Dr. Novak and Ms. Polka, we're going to ask both of you to respond to this question. Competition is absolutely critical to ensuring that the federal government uses the latest technology and gets good value for its purchases as well. So my question to you is, what are some of the measures that we can take in federal procurement to promote competition with these advanced technologies? Dr. Novak, I'll start with you, and then Ms. Polka.
I think Ms. Polka has already begun to touch on this question, the need for greater simplicity and greater streamlining to enable smaller vendors to be able to compete in this space. One needs to not simply have mastered the GSA schedules to be able to, should not be the sole threshold to being able to do business with the federal government. So streamlining and simplicity is going to be incredibly, incredibly important in this space if we're going to enable smaller people to compete. I think, and GSA has been making strides on this with their wonderful guide on agile procurement that they've put out, also really trying to push forward what is known as agile procurement. That is to say, not trying to anticipate every single requirement that we're going to have 5 years ahead of time in advance. These technologies are so new, our uses and experiences with them are so new, and designing tools correctly means actually doing it in little increments, testing what's working and improving. So the more that we are streamlining by going smaller in the scope, being more agile, and ensuring that we are actually then refining as we go, I think the more that we're going to both open things up to procurement, but also ensure that the tools that we are procuring translate into better services and better customer experience. Where we make the mistake is that, again, I'm going to anticipate everything that we need 5, 10 years down the road, again, on technologies that are changing now really by the day, if not by the week, and there are new capabilities emerging all the time. We can use, again, AI to help us in conceptualizing and drafting some of those requirements, but we need to be able to make more agile procurement the norm rather than the exception.
Thank you. Ms. Palka?
I think Dr. Novak said 90% of it, so if I can just plus 1,000 that, all I would add to it is there is some controversy over the notion of open source AI. I think in the kinds of contexts we're talking about, the dangers are much less, and the benefits can be pretty big. AI could have the effect of real consolidation of power because it's so hard to create these models. I mean, the investment that OpenAI put into ChatGPT is I don't remember the numbers, but it's staggering. And so they have a lot of power because of that. So the more that we can actually look at models that are more distributed, more democratized, and that's going to mean oftentimes open source, and make sure we can consider those when we're trying to find a solution in government, the more we will be, I think, promoting competition broadly in technology.
Good. Ms. Blauer, this question is for you. We know that a lot of innovation occurs at the local level and state governments, and so my question for you is, how are mayors and local officials approaching the procurement of AI systems in their cities, in their communities, in their states, and maybe give us some specific examples for the record. And then how can we learn from their work specifically? What are some lessons that we should take to heart here?
Thanks so much for the question. And for this one, I think it's important for us to look at local examples because there is some really promising practices, particularly around outcomes-based procurement. AI has the potential to deliver value across a whole host of outcome areas that we really care about. And local governments are leading with outcomes-based procurement. So instead of just scoping what the technology need is, I think it's prudent for us to think about how can we partner with AI developers and with AI platforms to actually achieve some of the most pressing outcomes that we've been trying to crack for generations. So in places like Seattle, where they're using an outcomes-based budgeting model in order to advance how they fund homeless services, or cities have been using outcomes-based procurements in order for them to, instead of having the provision of how you deploy LED light systems across your city system, have the light bulb providers buy into your energy efficiency goals. And outcomes-based procurements have the ability for you to actually scope AI, actually scope technology interventions in a way where you are partnering with the organizations for the actual improved customer experience, for the actual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, for the actual system safety and preservation outcomes you want to see across your transportation structures. And if we can pivot out of the silo of procurement being totally focused on the technology and get the technologists to partner with you through the procurement vehicles on the outcomes, it will be transformational. We're seeing it in cities, and I think it's absolutely possible also at the federal level.
Wonderful. The next question is going to be for all three of you. I'll start with Dr. Novick and then Ms. Palka, and then Ms. Blauer, you can wrap it up for this question. Studies have indicated that roughly 45% of chief data officers believe that they do not have the responsibilities for AI at their individual agencies. And yet, quality data is absolutely key to quality outcomes, as all three have already discussed and we're well aware of. So my question for you is, how can the federal government ensure that federal chief data officers are involved in the efforts to actually improve the delivery of services with AI? Dr. Novick.
I think the question suggests the answer, which is ensuring that they do. So as we've all talked about, data is, of course, integral to training AI models. Without data to analyze, the AI becomes fairly useless. What we're trying to do is actually use data to ensure that we're proactively delivering services in the way that Ms. Blauer already talked about. So I think having CDOs at the table is really, really essential, and mandating that their role includes, again, the proactive publication and availability of data, as is already required by law, and ensuring that we do more of that. That's going to require then more training, I think, for chief data officers and for data professionals in government around AI to talk about where those collaborations can occur, and ensuring that agencies do create those cross-functional teams and that cross-agency collaboration, as well as within agencies and then across agencies, to ensure that these new AI officers, data officers, policy people, everywhere that we can bring disparate disciplines together to talk about how we can better serve residents, I think the better job that we're going to do. So I think the question is really vital because it suggests the answer, which is we need the data people to be at the table, and we need to invest in the proactive publication and availability of data is really integral.
Thank you. Ms. Palka.
My colleagues at the table here are national experts on this, and I would like to cede my time to Ms. Blauer. Both of these folks have so much experience in this topic.
Great. Ms. Blauer, you have the final say on this question.
All right, thank you to both of you. So I was not a classically trained data person when I became essentially the de facto chief data officer of the state of Maryland. What I was someone who understood what it meant to work in government. I connected to the people of the front lines of government, and I was able to usher in a transformation of data use in government because I could relate to the challenges that the people in the organizations were trying to solve. I knew what it was like to be a probation officer, to sort of sit under the crushing weight of that bureaucracy. So when we think about how we attract CDOs into our government, if we're only hiring technologists into those roles and not people that have the softer skills that can be deferential to subject matter expertise that exists in your government, that can actually connect and translate from the technology to the policy making, to the legislative agenda setting, to the budget making, to all of the things that we know are the levers of government that are going to create change, then we're doing a disservice both to the position of CDO and to government itself. CDOs need to be able to have those rounded expertise so that they can, like I said, connect to the people who are delivering for your government and also to those that are leading change in your government. Where we've seen failures, both at the local and state level, is when we place a CDO in an IT agency and their role is sort of ordained just to be the person that hounds people to move data or to get data expressed for other use. Where we've seen great success is where they are empowered from a leadership level and that they are materially part of the big substantive change that government is embarking on.
Dr. Novick, New Jersey is one of the first states to develop guidance on how employees should use AI. So if you would, for the committee's benefit, kind of describe that guidance and more importantly, perhaps, how is it actually working in practice?
So thank you. I'm very excited, and Governor Murphy gave his State of the State speech yesterday in which the topic of use of AI, responsible and ethical use of AI, featured very front and center. And I am very proud that we are one of the first states to actually have clear guidance which says we want people to go out and try these things. It's not to say that we won't revise that guidance and we won't upgrade it and we won't change it as we learn better what these tools do and as they evolve, but the fact that we're going out and saying we want people to actually try this to the end of improving how we deliver services to residents. We're coupling, however, that encouragement to try things with broad-scale availability of training. So I lead a partnership of multiple states, including California, called Innovate US, run by public servants for public servants, where we are providing free training in responsible AI and other technology use to government workers. And I might say my co-panelists here have been, or will be soon, speakers who have been helping us to train government workers at no cost to public servants, and I think that's really important. Right now, OPM has a mandate whereby they have to use fee recovery to charge for training that they provide to government workers. We want to ensure that the training we're providing is actually free so that there is no disincentive to using it. But coming back to the policy question, we are telling people go out and try these tools, but ensure that when you're trying them, please do not enter any personally identifiable information. Please fact check anything that comes out of these tools. So we don't want to see those instances like the lawyer who filed the brief that still said in it, written by ChatGPT. So we want to be sure that you're actually fact checking what's coming out of these things in the way that you would if you asked an intern to write something. And we want to also be sure that people are taking advantage of these tools in ways that are actually supplemental to and aiding, as Senator Butler referred to, actually aiding government workers in how they do their work, not supplanting them. So ensuring that we're using AI as an auxiliary to our workers is very important, but again, undergirding all of that is training, 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 and training.
Ms. Palka, your book, Recoding America, outlines the disconnect that can occur between policymakers, policy implementers, and the general public. So my question for you is, how can government actually prioritize the customer when it comes to service delivery in the life cycle?
I think this is so critical that we have a fundamental shift in what we value in order to put the customer at the center. And I know this is a very high-level answer, but we have to value delivery as highly as we value policy, both here on the Hill and in the agencies, and to the points earlier, in states and in cities. We are very focused here on the words that we write, and we forget that the people on the other end don't look at those words. They go on a website and try to get unemployment insurance. They're trying to get their driver's license, or God forbid, they're in our criminal legal system and they're experiencing incredible burdens. They see delivery, and as I said, our human capital system in government broadly, not just in federal government, isn't set up to value that. We're set up to write words and hire contractors. I believe that putting the customer at the center of government is going to involve a pretty high-level shift to thinking about what is it that government actually does, what is our function, and valuing what it looks like to the person at the end of this incredible waterfall hierarchy as much as we do the business of actually writing policy.